Patch 10.2 is on the horizon, and with the public test realm being available to, well, the public, I figured this would be the perfect time to test out the upcoming tank tier sets. In this video, we're going to be breaking down the upcoming tier sets for the Protection Warrior with a primary focus on Mythic Plus. I want to break down how the 2 and 4 set are going to operate, any types of synergies with the class's talent tree, and finally my thoughts on the set. Let's take a walk. Starting with the 2 set bonus, this set reads, spending Rage has a chance to cause your next Shield Slam to consume your bleeds on a target, instantly dealing 100% of the damage and reducing the target's damage dealt to you by 10% for 5 seconds. Alright, let's break this down. When you spend Rage, you have a decent chance to actually gain a buff called Fervid. This will then cause your next Shield Slam to consume the bleeds on your target, dealing 100% of the remaining damage instantly. This means that both your Deep Wounds and your Rend will collapse, instantly dealing a fair bit of damage through Fervid Bite, which is the tier set bonus. Since bleeds are applied from Thunderclap, Revenge, and your auto attacks while running Devastator, most likely you're always going to have at least 2 of these bleeds active. This is actually a pretty significant damage increase in single target, especially once you start thinking about talents like Bloodborne, Thunderous Roar, and Thunderous Words. Anyways, targets affected by the debuff Fervid Bite will also deal 10% less damage to the Protection Warrior as well. With how strong the Warrior kit is, with things like Shield Block, Ignore Pain as well, along with Shield Wall and Spell Reflect, this DR isn't that impactful, but you can't really complain about a 10% passive DR. It's always going to be welcome. Before I give my thoughts on this set, mostly regarding design in terms of damage reduction, let's cover the 4 set bonus. The 4 set bonus reads, for each bleed consumed from a target, their damage dealt to you is reduced by an additional 2%. When Shield Slam consumes a bleed, the cooldown of Thunderclap is reset and the cooldown of Thunderous Roar is reduced by 1 second. This is pretty straightforward. The damage reduction component is being bumped up from 10% to about 14% on average, with it leading into the 16% rage when you're running Thunderous Roar. The second part of this set is pretty interesting, and it includes your standard cooldown reduction of a major ability. Similar to the set bonus from Season 2, which reduced Last Stand whenever you cast a Shield Slam, this will now reduce the cooldown of Thunderous Roar instead by 1 second. Before I complain, let's quickly talk about potential synergies. First, Thunderous Roar will now almost be required to take if you really want to optimize the tier set. While this is a pretty common ability for the Protection Warrior to use, it was pretty easy to trade this out for things like Shockwave or its corresponding capstone choices. While this is a possible downside, since consuming a bleed will reset Thunderclap, you could argue it's possible that we're no longer going to need to run Unstoppable Force. While this talent did increase Thunderclap's damage and Shockwave's damage, the second part of the spell, which reduces its cooldown, is a little less impactful now. I'm not saying you're no longer going to play this talent, but I think it's interesting to think about. If you decide to play Uproar, which is one of the capstones of the Thunderous Roar tree, this tier set will knock about 8 to 10 seconds off of the cooldown, moving it from a 60-second cooldown down to about a 50-second cooldown. If you decide to opt out of this talent to put the point elsewhere, you'll find Thunderous Roar will have about a 75-second CD, or about a minute 15 instead of the minute 30 that's expected. This ultimately comes down to procs and the ability to spend rage quickly. The idea of this set is to try to increase the rage we can actually generate and spend without overcapping, and obviously maximizing bleed damage. In terms of rage bolstering-esque talents, it's possible we may want to run Overwhelming Rage to increase our maximum rage by 30%. With a deeper rage pool, we can be way more aggressive with our Revenge and Ignore Pain spamming. If we take a look at the spec tree, Unnerving Focus can offer the Protection Warrior a significant amount of rage generation for 15 seconds while Last Stand is active. Moving into this next patch, we are no longer going to have the cooldown reduction though of the tier set, so this may or may not be worth playing. Especially with the increased haste, unless you have God Fingers, it might actually be hard to spend the amount of rage compared to how much you're going to be generating. But if you really want to push your damage of the set bonus to the limit, playing 2 points into Bloodborne seems pretty attractive. My issue with this though is that it's a 2-point node, and that takes away from the Protection Warrior's ability to actually spend points on things like Punish, or additional capstones, or even things like Spell Block. Lastly, since we're playing Devastator, running a capstone talent like Battering Ram is actually going to give us a significant amount of burst, since we're now going to have increased auto attack speed, resulting in, well, hopefully, more Shield Slam procs for additional Fervid Bites. Anyways, if I miss anything significant about the talents, let me know. This set tends to pigeonhole the Protection Warrior though, which is probably the best segue that I can really make to get to my complaints about this set. So let's instead call this a pros and cons list, since there are actually some great things about this set. The set offers a high value on single target damage, which again can be really good for raid progression, tyrannical weeks, or even just priority damage in general, especially if you're leaning heavily into talents that bolster the tier sets damage like Bloodborne and Thunderous Words. During your burst windows, a 16% DR for 5 seconds, but a 14% DR on average is nothing really to scoff at. Warriors ignore a ton of damage up front, almost 85 to 90%, so having a DR on top of that makes them almost immortal. Obviously not, but the point I'm trying to make is that warriors are sturdy. Another great thing about this set, and something that's always really worked well for the warrior class, is the cooldown reduction aspect. Thunderous Roar will now get 1 extra use every 5 to 6 minutes or so. So if you're really aggressive with using this on cooldown, you'll find that the protection warrior damage is going to just slap, especially in large AoE pools, which is always fun. But now for the cons. If you have a keen eye, you'll probably already tell where I'm going with this. First, the obvious. This tier set is the most pigeonholed set I've ever seen. Thunderous Roar is pretty much required, and the capstones are heavily incentivized. This forces us to spend 3 points into this area of the tree, leaving very little wiggle room to change talents. While most likely you would just not play Uproar, it makes the decision to play Shockwave even more difficult to make. While Protection Warriors have a great kit, they feel like they've always lacked utility in Mythic Plus, especially with the newer affix additions, including Incorporeal and Afflicted. This is a rabbit hole that I could go down, but I'm going to try to stay on topic here. We find the same thing in the Spec tree. Due to the set bonus being bleed damage based, it feels like we should play Bloodborne, but with it being a 2.0 node, it means that we have to sacrifice some pretty solid choices in either the capstone area. Things like Enduring Defense or Spell Block, Bolster, Punish. All of these are really strong choices, and playing Bloodborne doesn't really get us anything defensively. It really just doesn't feel great to be cornered into a specific build. The beauty of the new talent tree designs is that we have options, and a tier set that's making us not have options just goes against how the game was designed. At least that's how it seems. Alright, well, obviously I should just mention that nothing's being forced here, but it feels heavily incentivized is the point I'm trying to make. Realistically, just play what you want, but this is my general thought process. Another aspect of the set that really sucks for Mythic Plus, specifically in the DR component of the set, is that it's only ever really applied to one target at a time. Now, if you're lucky and you feel like tab targeting, you can definitely maximize it and maybe push it to about 3 targets, but the overlap would be minute at best. Maybe 1 second or so, but I doubt it. You're better off just really setting this up as a priority damage, but any way you take this, it's going to feel rough. A lot of other tank sets have damage reduction that covers both single target and AoE, and this set feels strictly just single target. I'm not sure how they could fix it. I mean, they could just turn it into a buff on the warrior instead of a debuff on the targets, but I don't know if that makes sense. They could even reduce the DR size to maybe compensate. We'll see though. Anyways, let me know what you guys think down below. While the set seems very single target focused, it's one of my favorite sets going into this next patch, and I'm excited to see what my warrior and other protection warriors can accomplish in 10.2. Once I'm able to test Mythic Plus, I'm probably going to do another video on warrior if I figure anything else out, or things that are worth mentioning, or if there's any changes. Lastly, just a massive shout out to my Patreon supporters. I can't thank you guys enough. I hope you're all staying happy, healthy, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.